village of Achi was a small, beautiful village blessed with crops, clean water, fertile farmlands, and different kinds of animals for hunting. Among her neighboring villages, Achi stood out for so many reasons. The villagers of Achi were known for their long lives, slow aging amongst the old, and the abundance they enjoyed in their village. But, despite being an envy to other villages around them, the villagers of Achi had one problem, and it was the killing of twins. For many generations, the villagers of Achi believed that the birth of two children was an abomination to their land and forbidden by the gods. They also believed that twins were harbingers of evil that would ruin their village and anger their gods. So, to rid their village of such evil, the villagers of Achi would kill their twin babies as a sacrifice to appease their gods. Because of this terrible tradition that had lingered for ages, pregnant women in the village of Achi would remain unhappy and restless until they gave birth and confirmed that they had not given birth to twins. In the village of Achi, there lived a woman named Ego. Ego was a young woman in her early 20s who was newly married to her husband, Eze. Eze and Ego were well known in Achi as their parents were very prominent people and everyone knew their marriage. After their marriage, the couple lived together as a happy family until Ego realized she was pregnant. Like every other pregnant woman in the village of Achi, Ego became worried when she learned of her pregnancy. Since she had no means to tell if she was pregnant with more than one child, Ego remained restless and concerned until she was due to deliver her child. On the day Ego was to deliver her child, her husband, Eze, took her to the midwife's hut early that morning. A couple of hours after they arrived, Ego began to feel the pains of labor and she was taken into the labor room. While Ego was inside the labor room, her husband, Eze, was outside the labor room silently praying to the gods of Achi for Ego to give birth to one child. Shortly after Eze said those prayers, he heard the cry of a baby coming from inside the room. Immediately after Eze heard the cry of the baby, he was relieved and was about to thank the gods for answering his prayers when he heard the second cry of a baby. Before Eze could wrap his head around what had just happened, the next thing he heard was, "Abomination! Abomination!" And the voices came from the midwives in the hut who had helped Ego with her delivery. "What is it? Tell me!" Eze rushed to the hut's entrance to ask the midwives what had happened, but they pushed him aside and ran out of the hut dramatically to alert the other villagers of what had happened. Sadly, Ego had given birth to twin babies, a boy and a girl, and according to the tradition of their land, both babies had to be sacrificed to appease the gods. After the midwives left to notify the other villagers of Ego's twin birth, Eze entered the hut to check on Ego, and as soon as he entered, he saw his wife Ego crying bitterly as she held her two babies. Seeing Ego in that state really broke Eze's heart. Eze had already envisioned that day ending happily, not knowing that things would turn out differently. He looked at his innocent babies and tears of disappointment rolled down his cheeks. "Everything will be fine. The gods understand best," Eze said to Ego. "But why? Why me? Why us?" Ego cried as she spoke. Barely 5 minutes after Eze entered the labor room, he heard the voices of angry villagers chanting, "Abomination! Abomination! We must kill them!" outside the labor room. Knowing what was about to happen next, Eze went outside to talk to the villagers. But the minute the villagers saw him, they yelled at him to go into the hut and bring out the twin babies. Without saying a word to them, Eze turned around and went into the hut. He walked to Ego, who was already clinging onto her babies, and took them from her. At first, Ego tried to resist, but when the chants of the angry villagers grew louder, she had to let the babies go. As soon as Eze took the babies out to the villagers, the chief priest of the village collected them from him, turned both babies upside down, and raised them up so all the villagers could see. After he did that, he announced that he was taking the babies to the village shrine to sacrifice them and appease the gods. After the chief priest left with the twins, all the villagers returned to their different homes one after the other, leaving only Eze and Ego there. In the village of Achi, it was taboo to mourn the death of twins, so no one wanted to associate with the grieving family. Knowing that his wife was in a horrible mental state, Eze did everything possible to console her and take care of her. But despite all that he did, Ego still quietly mourned her babies. After the death of her twins, Ego turned into a shadow of herself and was no longer as active and vibrant as she used to be. She also stopped going to the market to sell her wares and would remain in bed for days. Sometimes, Ego would be all by herself, and the next thing she would do was burst into tears for no reason. There were days when she refused to talk to Eze and the people around her, but despite how cold she had become, Eze still stood by her and supported her. Thankfully, after about 4 months of her twins' demise, Ego slowly returned to the woman she used to be. But she swore that she would never get pregnant again because of the pain her tradition had caused her. For 2 whole years, Ego did her best to not get pregnant. She would drink herbs, concoctions, and almost everything that would not let her conceive. But after trying so hard to not conceive for those years, one morning, Ego realized that her nightmare had become a reality. She was pregnant again. This time around, her pregnancy was already a month old before she realized it. When Ego broke the news to Eze that she was pregnant, Eze was both happy and sad. He was happy that he would finally become a father, but he was sad because he was unsure of how things would turn out. In the following months, Eze did everything a husband would do to support his wife until she was set to deliver. Afraid that the same thing would happen again, Eze invited his family member, who was a midwife, to his house because he trusted her. He didn't want to take Ego to the midwife's hut in case the same thing happened again, and he believed his family member would keep her mouth shut no matter what happened. That evening, Ego went into labor as expected. 2 hours after Eze's family member began the labor process, Eze heard the cry of a baby from inside his hut. Just as he was about to dash in and celebrate with his wife, he heard another cry. His wife, Ego, had given birth to 2 boys. Unsure of what to do, Eze went on his knees and begged his family member not to say a word to anyone. Eze knew that the moment word got out that his wife had given birth to twins, the villagers and the chief priest would all come to his compound that night. After begging for minutes, Eze's family member agreed that she wouldn't say a word to anyone, and she left. "We must leave Achi now!" Ego cried in a loud voice. "I cannot let them take my babies away from me again," she added. "We can't leave," Eze said in a teary voice. "If we leave, we will be banished," he added. "Which do you prefer, to be banished or to hand your children to those monsters?" Ego cried. Despite being in so much pain, Ego got up from the bed she was sitting on and began to pack her clothes into a basket. "But she has said that she will not say a word to anyone," Eze tried to convince Ego. "And you believe her?" Didn't you see the look of disgust on her face? She thinks your sons are an abomination, Eze. Ego barked at him. But Archie is our home. I do not have any other place we can go to, Eze said. Eze, Ego called him and pulled her right ear. If anything happens to my children, I will not forgive you. There are many villages around Archie that we can run to, so don't say you don't know where to go, Ego said, then continued to fold her wrappers into the basket. All right, we can't leave now, so let's wait a bit for the village to be quiet. If the villagers see us with the basket of clothes, they will ask where we are going, Eze said. No, I can't wait. What if your auntie decides to tell the villagers tonight? Will they wait? Ego said in an angry and frustrated tone. And with that, Eze took one of the babies and some money and helped Ego with her small basket of clothes. Without taking anything else out of their huts, Eze and Ego left the village of Archie that night. Luckily for them, their babies were very quiet and did not draw any attention that night till they got out of Archie and entered another village. Just as Ego had suspected, about an hour after Ego and Eze left their village by foot, Eze's aunt, the family member who helped Ego with labor, their village chief priest, and some villagers stormed Eze's compound that night, but they were too late. Angered that Ego and Eze had played a smart one on them, the village head placed a bounty on their heads and informed the neighboring villages about the people they were looking for. 2 days after Ego and Eze ran away from Archie with their babies, word spread to other villages that they were wanted in Archie, and it became very difficult for them to settle anywhere. After trying so hard to get a place they could rest their heads until they come up with another plan, Eze and Ego realized they weren't safe anywhere, and neither were their babies. Left with no resort, Eze and Ego were forced to hide in a sacred cave not too far from Archie. The cave was believed to be the cave of the ancestors of Archie and the burial ground of all the chief priests in the village's history. It also contained sacred scrolls and ancestral markings on the wall, so Eze and Ego were sure they would be safe there. Even though the cave was the last place Eze and Ego would want to stay, they had no choice but to hide there until they had a plan. Also, Ego barely rested after the birth of her twins, and her body gradually weakened from lack of rest and lack of enough food. So, Eze had to take his family there. On the first night Eze and Ego arrived at the sacred cave, Ego noticed that her babies barely cried, and for some weird reason, they acted like some invincible being was playing with them. At first, when Ego noticed this, she dismissed that the babies were just acting like babies. But when the twins continued to act differently, she called her husband's attention to it. "Don't you think there is something different about the babies?" Ego asked. Immediately she asked Eze. He admitted that he had also noticed a difference, but he wasn't sure it was something to be bothered about. Later that night, after Ego breastfed the babies, she and Eze fed on their leftover fruits and went to bed. But about an hour later, Ego woke up to a bright golden light shining in the cave. The light was so bright that she could barely see her babies and her husband, who was just sleeping beside her. While Ego was still trying to trace where the bright light came from, she spotted a tall, dark woman in a golden dress with long black hair walking toward her. "Ego!" the woman called. The woman's voice echoed, causing Ego to tremble in fear. "Do not be afraid. I am Ato, the first priestess of Archie and the first mother of twin babies." The woman introduced herself to Ego. But, isn't... Ego stuttered. "Forget about the stories you were told. I was a woman just like you, and I was forced to kill my babies too," the woman said. The lives of your babies are in danger, and you're the only one who can stop this madness of killing twins. You must come with me. I want to show you something, the woman said. Where are we going to? Ego asked in a trembling voice. The beginning of it all, the woman said. And without hesitation, Ego stood up, followed the woman into the light, and the light disappeared. Meanwhile, in Achi, the villagers were actively searching for Ego and Eze because their village chief priest had told them that if they did not find and kill the twin babies in 7 days, the gods of the land would strike every woman dead at the end of 7 days. Did you love this story? Tell us your favorite part in the comment section below and watch out for part 2. Please do not forget to like, share and subscribe to our channel and follow us on Instagram and Facebook for more updates. Thank you. As soon as Ego followed Ato into the bright golden light, she felt a cold sensation overwhelm her whole body. The next thing she knew, she and Ato were standing in a village she did not recognize. Do you know where we are? Ato asked Ego. No, I don't. Where are we? Ego asked. We are in Achi, 200 years before you were born, Ato responded. And immediately Ego heard that, she looked around in shock. She had just been taken back in time and could barely recognize the village of Achi where she was born and raised. Everything looked so different, from the huts to how the people dressed, and somehow even the language the villagers spoke sounded different. While Ato and Ego were standing close to a hut, Ego watched as the villagers of Achi danced to the hut. When the villagers arrived at the hut, an old man emerged from among them. He walked to the hut's entrance, broke 3 white eggs, poured some local gin on the same spot where he had broken the eggs, and said some incantations. Immediately after the man poured the gin and said the incantations, lightning struck in the sky and all the villagers of Achi jubilated. The lightning was a sign that the gods of the land had accepted the gin and he had chosen a priestess for himself. While the villagers of Achi were dancing and jubilating, a young woman with small red clothes tied around her chest and waist came out of the hut holding a wooden staff decorated with red strings, white cowries, and human skulls. That woman was Ato, and she had just been chosen by the gods of Achi to be the seer and priestess of Achi at age 18. While Ego watched the scene, she couldn't help but notice the striking resemblance between the young priestess and Ato, who stood beside her. Is that you? Ego asked. Yes, that's me. That was the day I became the first priestess of Achi. Ato answered in a cold tone. You see, I wasn't the only one in the village of Achi who wanted to serve the gods. There was a man named Azuka, and he was the son of a chief priest whom the villagers believed would take after his father, just as his father had taken after his grandfather. But for some reason, we all did not understand. The gods of our land rejected Azuka and chose me, making me the first priestess to serve this land. Ato explained. Look, there he is. Ato pointed to a man at the back of the crowd. He was frowning and obviously did not look happy that the gods had chosen a woman over him. Even though the gods had chosen me to look after the spiritual affairs of this land, Azuka still paraded himself as the priest of the village, and he would go around healing people for money, which was forbidden in our land, Ato said. And when the news of his misbehavior reached me, I consulted the gods about it, and I was told to warn Azuka to stop his acts. Well, I warned Azuka several times until one day, Ato added. While Ato spoke, Ego suddenly felt that overwhelming cold sensation again. The next thing she knew, she realized that she and Ato were standing in a place that looked like the village square. In that village square, Ego spotted Azuka standing next to a woman who was convulsing badly. She was an epileptic woman having a seizure. Also, the villagers of Achi had gathered around Azuka and the epileptic woman to see if Azuka could heal her. To stop the woman's seizures, Azuka took some leaves out of his medicine bag and tapped the woman's forehead 3 times. As soon as he did that, the seizure stopped and the woman stood up like nothing had happened earlier. When the woman stood up to her feet, Azuka demanded that she pay him 30 cowries or he would return her sickness to her. At first, the woman tried to beg Azuka to not charge her, but when she realized that Azuka was serious about the fee, she paid him the 30 cowries. After collecting his fee, Azuka was just about to leave the village square when he heard the priestess Ato screaming his name. Azuka! Azuka! Priestess Ato called him. Have I not warned you several times to stop parading yourself as the priest of this village and to stop healing people for a fee? Priestess Ato said. How dare you call me by name? Don't you have respect for your elders? Azuka backed at Princess Ato. When the villagers saw the tension between Priestess Ato and Azuka, they all stood and watched. Azuka! Priestess Ato called him in a stern and angry voice. Consider this as your last warning, she added, and with that, she walked out of Azuka and the rest of the villagers. As soon as the young Priestess Ato walked out of Azuka, Ato turned to Ego and said, that was the day Azuka and I became rivals. He was so mad that I had humiliated and embarrassed him openly, so he swore to pay me back. Ato said, since I was already betrothed to a man and pregnant for him before I became the priestess of the land, a few months later, I was due to deliver. Ato added. Immediately after Ato said that, Ego began to hear the screams of a woman in labor. When she looked around, she noticed that she and Ato were no longer standing in the village square. They were standing next to a labor room with midwives running in and out. I expected that day to be the happiest day of my life, but it turned into a nightmare. I gave birth to 2 children at once, which had never happened in our land. And Azuka used that opportunity to get rid of me. While Ato and Ego stood by the hut, Ego heard the screams of midwives from inside the labor room and saw them dashing out in fear. Shortly after the midwives ran out of the room, they returned with Azuka, the village head, and some other villagers. This has never happened before. It is an abomination for one woman to give birth to 2 babies. Azuka said to the villagers after he went into the room to see the babies. The gods of our land have told me that if we do not kill and sacrifice these babies, the village of Achi will suffer greatly. Azuka lied. As soon as he said that, the villagers of Achi began to murmur, knowing that it was wrong to kill innocent babies, but no one wanted to suffer the consequences. While the villagers deliberated and murmured, Azuka stormed into the labor room and snatched the twin babies from Priestess Ato. Because Priestess Ato was very weak from her labor, she could barely get out of bed to rescue her children from Azuka or convince the villagers that Azuka was lying against the gods. As Ego watched as Azuka turned the hearts of the villagers against Priestess Ato, Ato turned to Ego and said, and that was how he took my twin babies away and slaughtered them in front of the villagers. At the same village square, I confronted him. As if killing my children was not enough, he convinced the elders of the village to banish me from the village, saying I was an abomination. If not, I would invoke the wrath of the gods on everyone, and they did banish me. So what happened to you after you were banished? Ego asked Ato. I went to the same cave you slept at, and I died there. Ato responded. See, Ego, I brought you here because I failed as a mother, and I do not want the same thing to happen to you," she added. "What must I do now to save my children? They killed my first children, and I'd rather die than let them do the same thing again." Ego said, "You must go back to Achi, and you must let everyone know that the killing of twin babies started from a place of jealousy and not because the gods had ordered it. Giving birth to 2 children is a blessing and not a curse. If animals can give birth to more than 1 offspring, then why can't we do the same as humans? What you're asking me to do is almost impossible. The villagers of Achi will kill my husband and me the moment we step foot on Achi," Ego said. "No, they won't. They want you and your babies alive," Ato said. "And even if they don't kill us, how do I plan on convincing an entire village that had been killing twin babies for generations that the gods of the land are against the killing of twin babies?" Ego asked. "If you let me, I will use you and speak through you to the people," Ato said to Ego. "If you using me will help me save the lives of my innocent babies, then I accept," Ego said. "All right then, let's return to your time," Ato said. Immediately after Ato said that, Ego saw the same bright golden light she had seen when Ato appeared to her in the cave, and the next thing she knew, she was back in the cave with her husband and children. As soon as Ego realized she was back in the cave, she immediately woke up her husband Eze and explained everything she had seen. "Are you sure you weren't dreaming? You know you have been so stressed these past few days, and you could be mistaken," Eze said out of concern. "No, Eze, I knew what I saw. And this was not a dream. Priestess Ato came to me here. Please, my husband, let us do what she has said. It is the only way we can save our children," Ego said. "All right, get some sleep. Tomorrow by sunrise, we will go to Achi," Eze said. And with that, Ego went back to bed. The following day, Ego and Eze woke up at sunrise. After Ego breastfed her babies, they began their journey back to Achi. Since they were already close to the village, it took them less than an hour to get there by foot. Immediately, Ego and Eze entered Achi that morning. The villagers who saw them began to shout and call the attention of other villagers who were still inside their huts. Barely 10 minutes after Ego, Eze and their babies entered Achi, all the villagers came out of their huts and followed them to the village square. Before Eze and Ego reached the village square, the news of their arrival had already reached the village priest and the village head, so they got to the village square before the rest of the villagers. "Give us those babies now!" the village head said to Eze as he walked to collect the babies from him. But Eze resisted. "Are you defying the order of the gods?" the village priest asked in an angry tone. Roughly a minute after the village priest asked Eze that question, a bright golden light appeared in their midst, and Priestess Ato revealed herself to everyone. Some of the villagers who were scared ran away as soon as they saw Ato walk out of the golden light. "Do not be afraid. I am not here to harm any of you, but to deliver you all from your ignorance," Ato said. "Many years ago, before all of you were born, I was the priestess of this village and the first mother of twin babies. But because my rival Azuka was mad that the gods had chosen me instead of him, he lied against the gods just so he could kill my twin babies and pay me back. And that was how the killing of twin babies started," Ato added. Immediately she said that, the villagers who were still in the village square began to murmur. "Today, I have come to say that twin babies are not a curse. They are double blessings from the gods. If animals can give birth to more than one baby, why can't we? For many generations, different chief priests have spilled their blood and slaughtered innocent babies. And that must end today. If it doesn't, then the real wrath of the gods will come upon you all, and the blood of every twin baby killed in this village will be on your heads, Ator said. Then she disappeared. After Ator appeared to the villagers of Achi, even the priest and the village head, who were both trying to take the twins from Eze, could not say anything. Everyone was in shock and could not believe that an ancestor had appeared to them in broad daylight. One after the other, the villagers of Achi returned to their homes, and no one ever mentioned killing Ego and Eze's children after that day. Though Ego expected that Ator would need to possess her body to communicate with the villagers of Achi, she was glad Ator revealed herself to them instead. She later understood that Ator was asking for her consent to reveal herself to the villagers of Achi. From that day henceforth, the killing of twin babies stopped in Achi, and pregnant mothers stopped being afraid of the number of babies in their wombs. As for Ego and Eze's sons, they became popular in the village of Achi for being the first ever twins to survive in the history of Achi. And as for Ego, 4 years after she gave birth to her twin boys, she got pregnant again and gave birth to another set of twins, 2 girls. It was almost like the gods were compensating her for the loss of her first 2 babies. With 2 new additions to her family, Eze and Ego were thrilled, and they all lived happily ever after. The end. Did you love this story? Tell us your favorite part in the comment section below. Please do not forget to like, share and subscribe to our channel, and follow us on Instagram and Facebook for more updates. Thank you.